I was going to say, hi, this is Paul.
Hi, this is John.
And we are in a hotel by Heathrow Airport. And Andrew from Salisbury just dropped us off, had a wonderful day with him. And we've got a few hours. We've got to go to sleep early because we've got a very early flight. But we thought we'd sort of debrief the whole trip. And that will give us something of a video record and give you an idea of exactly what happened and what was accomplished. So let's begin in the homeland and native place of our dear friend John's birth.
Well, I had made plans with Job ahead of time to surprise you. And so our first stop after we left the airport, unbeknownst to Paul, we went straight to Scheveningen to my favorite herring tent and bought fresh herring that Paul has never eaten before. So this was Paul's introduction to haring. And so what did you think of it?
I thought it was delicious. I like fish, and raw fish doesn't scare me. And no, it was delicious. It was a little surprising when we had flown. We'd left church. We'd left Livingstone's. I got out of there as soon as I could after the service. We got in the car and we went back to my house and quickly kissed my wife and grabbed my bags and then drove to San Francisco Airport and got on a plane, spent 10 hours on the plane, and had a quick turnaround in Copenhagen, and then got on a plane to Schiphol in Amsterdam, and then all that rush, and we get into the car and we drive to the beach. And I thought, this is the strangest thing. Why on earth are we driving to the beach? But we had to have the herring.
Oh, but there was a method to my madness. Because I have gone to the old country many, many times, and I know how to offset jet lag. And so what you want to do is when you get there, you want to stay awake as long as you possibly can. Use any diversion possible, and if it takes herring, then it takes herring, or kibbling, or a combination of those. And you try and stay awake so that you go to sleep approximately the same time all the other people go to sleep.
Yeah.
And then you wake up with them for the events of the next day. And in my experience, that has always been the best way to adapt to the time change.
So we didn't really have too much jet lag, so that worked out quite well. So then we stayed with Job's lovely friend in the Netherlands.
She was a nice lady.
She was very nice. She put us up for, how many nights did we sleep there? 3, 4?
4, yeah.
4 nights. I think that's the longest we stayed in any one place.
Yeah.
And
her name was Mariella, and she was wonderful and provided us with excellent accommodations. So
we got to know Job's little boy and his wife. So then the next day was a tour day, and we I guess I could stick. John decided to sing a song, and he sang a song to the Zuider Zee that is no longer a sea. It's now just a big inland lake because the Dutch have tamed the waters and never again will be flooded as they were flooded in 1953.
Different incident.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Zuider Zee, the closing off of the Zuider Zee was primarily land harvest.
Okay.
That was to dry up a large portion of the inner sea and to gain that fertile soil. The Delta record, which was on another day, we'll get back to that in a minute. So that was, but the Zuider Zee ballade was, and you can look that up, you can Google it, it's on YouTube Music. And so the Zuider Zee ballade is about the melancholy and the grieving that the fishermen did because their livelihood was taken away by the polder project. And so the Zuider Zee was saltwater, and it had a certain fish ecology, and there were many harbors all around the Zuider Zee, and of course one of them we were at is Elburg, where we had the eel. We ate the eel, and we had some appelgebak met slagroom, and we had invited
apple pie.
We had invited one of our Dutch organizers to join us there, so that was nice.
And we had the much hailed Chocomel, which is chocolate milk.
Oh, it's special. Nutricia Chocomel. It's advertised even in England. So, but anyway, yeah. So
we had
then
a lovely stop there.
the trip was to reunite Paul with his ancestry in northern Groningen. And when we say northern Groningen, the very, very upper northeast tip of Groningen in Appingedam. And well, what did we discover there, Paul?
Well, there's a little Jewish synagogue that was basically its inhabitants were wiped out by the Nazis. And I took a bunch of pictures there and put them on Twitter. There were a lot of Van der Kleis there that were in the synagogue and were in the cemetery. It's a little vague to see exactly where some of my people were, but there were the given names were very much of the same branch. And so when I get home, I'm going to do some more genealogy work and see exactly how they were related to me. But yeah, it was sobering. It was not a part of our family story. My grandfather once intimated to my father during the Second World War that if they had still been living in the Netherlands, they might have been in trouble during those Nazi years. And but my great-great-grandfather sent my great-grandfather to Spring Lake, Michigan, and that was sort of the line that, of course, I came from on my father's side. But it was I think a fairly sobering testimony. So the little synagogue was then later used as a church, but they preserved in the synagogue a lot of the elements because they very much wanted to honor the Jews it was a significant Jewish community in that town that was wiped out, and they've never had a Jewish community again in that town. We had a lovely tour of the church given by a gentleman who gave us a tour of the town, which was really generous on his part. And so yeah, that was really a highlight of that trip, going way north, and also getting a sense of that town and its competition with Groningen.
Yeah.
And so it was there was a big church, and we saw the evolution of the church. So it was really a wonderful trip into Dutch history. That was quite an old town. And so yeah, that was very good. That was very good. So John and Job and I did that trip.
And then we went back across the Afsluitdijk, but not before we first had another meal in Harlingen. And that, of course, is on the far northwestern tip of Friesland. And we stopped in some towns. What was that all about, Paul?
They had me stand by a funny sign that means naughty things in English, and they just thought it was so funny if I stand by the sign, by the naughty things in English, and it's beer, sex, rum, something like that.
Sex beat 'em.
Sex beat 'em.
That was the name of the town. Yeah.
So apparently this is a common thing, and people
they make
do
a
that.
special parking pull out there for cars to stop by that sign. So.
And Dawn Waldheis, the mother of CRC Voices that brought us together, said that she also, when she visited there, did the same thing.
Yeah, nice.
So Dawn Waldheis gets a shout out on the YouTube video.
And then we had a lovely dinner there on the water by the harbor.
Oh, yeah. What town was that?
Harlingen.
Harlingen. That was beautiful. It was a beautiful town, wonderful restaurant, and just John, Job, and I really had a lovely time together. We had so much fun. Job really wanted to do the whole trip, but he's got a little 1-year-old at home and a wife, and really can't just take that much away. So. And
then we did the Afsluitdijk, and I almost made it all the way across the Afsluitdijk without telling the Afsluitdijk joke. Almost.
Yeah, well, you can. These nasty Europeans are so. No wonder they keep having wars. They're not good to each other. They the Dutch and the Frisians and the Germans and the French and the English.
Don't forget the Belgians.
The Belgians. So the reason they keep having wars is they're just not nice to each other. If they'd stop perpetuating these stereotypes and these nationalist jokes, maybe they'd stop. They'd stop with all the wars here in Europe that Americans are supposed to stay out of.
Right.
So that was, and that first day was designed as sort of a day to get us in the time zone. And John and Joe very graciously showed me around the Netherlands, and it is a beautiful country, and that was really a ton of fun.
On the way back, of course, it got to be a little dark already, so we kind of raced home on the freeway back to Sliedrecht. And then the next day, Wednesday, was when we made our first appearance in Utrecht, which is where the organizers of all Dutch events had kind of settled on Utrecht as the center of activity, and various events were to have happened, and it got boiled down to a lovely panel discussion with, well, actually, was there a record, or will there be a record of that panel discussion?
No, it's posted on the channel.
That's already posted, so
Yeah,
we don't
I-
have to say anything about it.
No.
Oh, you already know about the panel discussion, which was in the basement of the theological school in Utrecht, formerly of Kampen, and so you can find that online. And then what did we do after that?
So then people started arriving, and then we had the Estuary meeting.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
We had the Dutch Estuary meeting.
Yeah, and that was that was a foreshadowing of what this trip was going to be about.
Yeah.
Because all along we said, if we can gather a crowd with Paul's celebrity, his online channel celebrity, we don't have to exaggerate that, but I mean, he has become somewhat famous in various parts of the world among the aficionado. And when the aficionado get wind of the fact that Paul shows up, they show up. And so you organize an event, whether it's a conversation, a panel discussion, a debate, or something more academic, as we did in England later. People show up. And so we very much want to appreciate all the Discord people and all the local YouTubers that follow and the people that write in the comments. They are the ones that showed up for the event. And what ended up happening is we had the opportunity to introduce people to the Estuary Protocol. And the Estuary Protocol has its own charm. I don't want to brag about that, but it is a way to really enable people to connect with each other in a very special way. And so that was our hope all along, to be able to bring people together and encourage them to get a little taste of the estuary experience, and to find out how easy it is to engage each other in meaningful conversation using that protocol, and to see that scalable and repeatable. Because you can start those estuary groups everywhere. And it really pleases me to say that at that evening, we kind of took inventory, and we said, okay, well, of all the people here, how many of you could imagine yourself in the next 5 years to be starting an estuary group in your hometown? And lots of hands went up, and we got all those names, and we put them on a list, and we actually started a little WhatsApp group about that, which was originally designed to encourage the formation of estuary groups. It has already long moved on to more important things like art online, and where is the nearest Discord server link, and what was the other one? A lecture about the Eastern Orthodox Church. So it is already serving other purposes, but originally it was intended to be a place where we could kind of compare notes about where would be a good place, who can come to what location to form these estuary groups on the ground. And I think that the last I heard was there was going to be one in Leiden, one in the Zaanse Schans, that would be Zaandam area, maybe around Purmerend or somewhere around there, and then another one in Utrecht. So if all of that really happens, there will be 3 new estuary groups in Holland alone. So that's a wonderful idea to look forward to. I don't know whether that will happen next week or in a month or 2 months or whenever, but it really doesn't matter. As long as people are kind of dreaming about that possibility, then we've done our work.
And we split up into 3 groups.
Yep.
And so 2 groups did the Estuary Protocol, and 1 group sort of did Q&A with me. But one of the big things that really happened on this trip was we went place after place, and we basically did sample estuary meetings, and I couldn't be more happy with how successful that was. So one of the estuary group, one of the little estuary group breakout groups of the Dutch event, that actually had some of the meeting in Dutch, no? And which I think is a good thing, because I think it's ideal that, I mean, the Germans very quickly realized they should do their estuary meetings in German. The Dutch realized they should do their estuary meetings in Dutch. And again, it was a tremendously successful evening. A bunch of people came out who I had randos conversations with. That's another element. Those tend to be the people often who make their way out after we've had a little bit of initial conversation.
You have a connection.
To meet each other more. And so that was I remember coming home from that meeting. I was just tremendously excited and thrilled by how that meeting went. And I think we had a sense that a lot of people connected with each other, they liked each other, and they want to continue to pursue relationships with each other. And part of what's developing as in the process of this trip is that not only are we seeing estuary groups form, but we're probably going to see sort of estuary hubs form. And hubs might be one or more estuary groups that could, at some point in the future, be able to do a unified event, let's say.
Such as what they did in Germany.
Such as what they did in Germany. Maybe a unified annual event, such as what they've been doing in Chicago. And then eventually we'll probably have something of a circuit, so that if this estuary movement continues to gain momentum, we could have speakers come through like myself, John Vervaeke, Jonathan Peugeot, and basically begin to develop the infrastructure so that the kinds of people that the estuary participants want to attract, have more access to, want to further the conversation, we can sort of have an infrastructure to be able to support that.
And those two things then would feed into each other, because the existing estuary groups would feed into these larger events with speakers, and the larger events would draw another crowd,
Right.
and expose them then again to estuary. So they would kind of reinforce each other, both the annual events and the regular meetings of an estuary. They would kind of symbiotically relate to each other. So
Yep.
that's how I picture it.
Yep. So another thing that this trip really did was sort of continue my thinking and my imagination on what estuary could become. And again, all of this is, we don't know. It all depends on what people do on the ground with their groups, and if it really does take off and develop. But everything that I saw in all of the groups that we ran here in Europe leaves me more encouraged about the potential for this to bring people together, foster conversation, do all the kinds of things that I'd like to see Estuary do. So I left that meeting really high, really excited. We had to get back. We didn't want our poor host had to stay up late a number of nights because we didn't get back until after 11 o'clock. But super excited about the Dutch meeting and how that estuary group went.
Yeah, and then on Thursday, we actually did an estuary. On Thursday, we went, and that's what Paul meant earlier when he talked about the 1953 flood. On Thursday, we went to see the Delta Werken, which is Dutch for Delta Works, which is the closing off of the major waterways and the levees that were created to be able to ward off the flood from the North Sea. Just a way to protect the land. We went there to the Delta Werken Museum and saw how much damage that flood in '53 did, and how that really rallied the whole country, because lots of people were killed, lots of people were homeless, lost everything, and that really inspired the Dutch government to pour lots of resources into a major engineering project, and we saw all kinds of details about that and how that works and how the gates work, and we drove over top of those levees. So yeah, that was super interesting. I'm glad that you could see that, Paul.
Yeah, that was quite impressive. It's a major project that a country as small as the Netherlands undertook. It's very, I mean, Peterson often talks about the Netherlands. And I was impressed by it. You can't help but go to that place and just see what they did to try to prevent another massive flood like they had in 1953. That I mean, just a tremendous amount of the country was inundated from that flood. So very, very impressive, very interesting.
And what did we do the rest of that day? Eat haring, maybe?
Yeah, John and his great search for herring. But then he wanted at the end of the day. Finally, Job and I kind of put our foot down and said, you know, we should have one evening here that we actually get home and to bed on some kind of time. And so we got home at a 9:30, more reasonable hour than we had been all those other nights. So then the next day we went to Leiden. And that was fun. So
Well, you went to Leiden.
I went to Leiden.
I drove you to Leiden, dropped you off, and went to visit my sister who lives in Holland.
That's right.
And had a lovely time with her. And I'm not going to give you any more details about that, but she lives in Zoetermeer, and she was glad to see me and her husband, of course, both. So, and then you did something else in Leiden.
So we hung around with Job and Aaron. Now Aaron was the young man in the panel discussion. So if you haven't seen that, he's the young man there. And what a wonderful young man. He's now teaching philosophy at one of the schools there in Leiden. And so we walked around the old city and looked at a bunch of churches and Rembrandt's house. And a bunch of those things. Had a lovely breakfast in a little place there. Really a wonderful time together. And that then, let's see. Oh, that's right. So then John visited your sister. You had Job's car. Then you drove back to Leiden and met us there right before we did the interview with the New World.
Yep.
How do you say that in the Netherlands?
The Nieuwe Wereld. The Nieuwe Wereld is a Dutch organization that also likes to reflect on current issues and current events, not necessarily from a Christian perspective, but they don't shy away from Christian input into their content, and they prefer to do it in Dutch, I believe.
Yeah.
And they made a special exception for you because you have a Dutch name.
Yeah.
We're very honored.
Well, Rod Dreer, they had Rod Dreer on there.
Yeah, well, if they do it for Rod Dreer, then certainly they have to do it for you.
That's right. Vanderklay's a lot more Dutch than Dreer.
Yeah.
So, but they seem to be sort of in this post-progressive phase too. They're highly open. They're a little bit turned off by certain closedness that some progressive stances have engendered. And so I'm really looking forward to that interview coming out. I was a little nervous about it. I really had no idea the way that's going to go, because so it was a professor of, I think he has his PhD in economics, and so I had no idea the way the conversation would go. So we got to talk a little bit before, and then I thought the conversation went very, very well. You could see it from the other room.
Yeah.
And so I'm really looking forward to it. And actually, that conversation and his question to me about the secularism of the Netherlands sort of began building for me sort of themes that I would use throughout my trip here in the various talks and preachings that I gave. Because one of his questions for me was, how does it seem to me as a Christian minister to find such a secular country as the Netherlands? And I told him that
He had found that.
yeah, I actually thought that the Netherlands was, at least in its stones, was very secular. In California,
No, Christian.
yes,
In its stones, very.
very Christian, and sort of unlike California, which is deeply secular. And so I began to riff on that with him, and that sort of began to feed my imagination of some other themes that I could develop in some of the other speeches that I would give on the tour. So I don't know when that's coming out. He said probably 10 or so days, and he'll let me know when it comes out. And when it does, I'll post it on Twitter and maybe put a link on the on my channel somehow. But and then at some point I will also post that interview on my channel. But if you get a chance to watch that, it was, I thought, a really good conversation. So.
And then we had to race to Germany,
Yep.
and that all went well. Joe did the driving, and it turned out good. Did Joe do the driving?
Joe
Did I do the
did a
driving?
lot of the driving. You started doing some driving at that point.
Oh, okay, that's right, yeah. Anyway, yeah, that went fine, and we didn't find any herring along the way, but that's okay. And then the whole part about the German events and the festival and the content thereof was already posted on your channel. So if you want to see that, then go check that out. And then we ended up. Should we tell the story? Did we already tell the story about the right address, wrong town?
Yes, we told that story in the
other
video.
Okay.
So we don't have to repeat that story.
Okay. All right. All right.
So anything on the German festival, you can look at that video. I'll just put the link below for all of the videos from this trip in the notes below. So if you want to see the Dutch panel discussion, if you want to see the report on the German festival, that's below. And
more of the German festival will also be posted when Cassidy gets around to that.
Yes, so all
she
of the...
posted on her channel first, I
Right.
think, and then it'll be made available to a larger audience.
So all of the speeches and panel discussions that took place at the German festival will be coming to YouTube once Cassidy gets that out. I don't have those recordings. Well, we should probably talk about we should talk about a little bit about the snafu that hit trying to get to the British Isles.
What?
Yeah, we should.
Are we going to talk about that?
Well, but the reason we have to talk about that is because it took us back to
Holland.
and that was really a good day.
It was.
And so basically, after we did that video that you can watch of the debriefing of the German festival, we decided we'd do the video first, and then we would go out to a restaurant. We had our second experience of going to a German restaurant where they didn't take cards of any kind, and we had to scramble around for cash to pay for our dinner. And the food that we had in both those German restaurants was delicious, really excellent. Love the German food. So we're at the hotel, we're at the restaurant, we're all relaxing, having a good time. We had done the video, everything was great. And then before we realized that we needed cash, we started thinking about, okay, well, now we're going to drive over and get a train and go under. And so we're on our phones and we're just starting to look up, trains to get through the Channel Tunnel over to the British Isles. And right there we begin to realize we can't get any train tickets.
Either the strike or other problems, other transportation things were snafu or whatever it was, but everything was booked.
Everything was booked.
Or
booked or canceled. There was no tickets available.
But I'll fix it.
Well, we gotta
take the ferry.
Okay, so then we were gonna fly, but I had the wrong month because we thought, we'll just get cheap flights, but then flights were very expensive. So we got back to the Airbnb that we're staying in, and John, we're looking at like $400 or $500 flights just to jump, and John was not about to accept that. So then he says, well, we'll find a ferry. So
yeah, and so that Hoek van Holland to Harwich ferry is actually quite economical. And wouldn't you know, there is a sailing at 9:00. So I said to the guys, if we get in the car now.
So it's 11:30 at night in Landau, Germany.
After a long day.
After a long day, after some both days of the festival, some long days, and we're pretty tired. And John says, if we get in the car now,
and we drive to Hoek van Holland
through the night,
we can get on the ferry by 9.
And I'm like, this is insane. Let's just spend the money, take the air flight. No. We should leave now. Byrne had already gone to bed. So we had to wake poor Byrne up because we were his drive to the train station.
So he had to make other plans.
And then we had to call poor Matthew, Matthias, because he had to help Byrne get a cab over to the train station. And then suddenly he had to hurry up and pack and get everything together. And Job is just, thinking, why did I ever talk to Paul Vanderklay? And why did I ever get into any of this business? Because now I'm about to drive through the night from Landau to the Hook of Holland to get some ferry.
Shall I book it? And they all said, well, we're in the car now, you may as well book it.
Might as well book it.
I
So
booked it.
So he booked it. So then we're like, okay, we'll take shifts driving because we have to drive through the night. So John was awake, so John was going to drive the first shift. Job was in front with them, was going to navigate. I was going to go in the back seat. I'm a good sleeper, so take a nap, and So,
No traffic. It was lovely.
Yep. No traffic, so I'd just go in the back seat and I would sleep, and so then I sleep for an hour or so, and then I kind of wake up, and they're up there talking, and then they say, "Would you like the bad news or the good news?" And I was a bad news first kind of guy. I'd like to end on the good news. There was no good news. It was only bad news.
No, there was good news.
What good news was there?
There was going to be hiding.
Oh gosh. So the bad news was, well, tell them what you did.
Well, that ferry, that 9 o'clock sailing for the Hoek van Holland Harwich trajectory was for the leg from Harwich back to Hoek van Holland.
So it was from the
England
British Isles
back to Holland. And the one from Holland to the British Isles was A, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and B, full. So it wasn't going to happen.
So we're already 2 hours on the way back to the Netherlands in the middle of the night. So none of us are going to get any kind of good night's sleep. I mean, you're in the back of a small car, and okay, so then we pull off to a gas station. I start driving, and Joe sort of stays awake with me, and John takes a nice nap in the back seat. Anyway, and at that point, Job and I are talking, because John's idea was to go to the ferry terminal and see if one way or another we could talk our way onto that thing. And Job and I thought that was a terrible idea, so we decided, let's just go back to Job's house in Sliedrecht, and then we'll figure out things from there. So that's what we did.
So Job slept in his own nice warm bed.
So we got in about 5 in the morning.
Yeah.
Job slept in his nice warm bed. We didn't want to,
disturb the whole household.
disturb the whole household
So
by
Paul
coming
and I
in
slept
there.
in the parking lot in Sliedrecht
of the
fire department.
of the firehouse in the car. The rest of, a couple more hours sleep. So yeah, no sleep that night, not much. So then we got together around Job's kitchen table and
Come up with Plan C.
Plan C, the nice British Airways tickets at $500 a pop. They weren't so attractive, and then John found tickets on Ryanair.
From Eindhoven to some airport in Greater London.
North of London, a smaller airport.
Yeah.
So, but meanwhile, in London, we had John, who had been arranging everything, not quite knowing where you got to pick us up from a boat. I mean, poor John doesn't know what to do. So finally say, we're coming in this airport. And so then we get on that plane, and that all goes fine. And then...
Oh, wait a minute. No. This is where Arnout came in.
Oh, yes.
Because he is the one who, Job had to go to work.
Right.
Job couldn't do this. So we were looking for a driver, and Job said he can use my car, so we had a car but no driver. So then I figured, well, nee heb je, ja kun je krijgen. So we asked Arnout if he wanted some more subject matter for his new book. Because Arnout is writing a book. You all people, you should know this. Arnout Gorder is writing a book. It's not quite finished yet, but he's well on his way, and it's going to be good. So anyway, we called him up and said, hey, can we pick you up in Gorinchem? That's slang for Gorinchem, but I only know it as Gorinchem. So we went to Gorinchem, picked up Arnout, and he was the one who was going to drive us to Eindhoven and then return Job's car back to Sliedrecht. And apparently all that went real well. And from my point of view, it went especially well because I just now received an email from Arnout in which he reminded me of all the wonderful things we did. We toured the church.
Yep.
And the church has a vision for how to connect with the ordinary people. It's very estuarial.
Yep.
They lay out a red carpet into the marketplace. From the front door of the church, they lay out a red carpet into the marketplace, and anybody is welcome to come and grab a cup of coffee for free at the church and have a chat. So, and superb herring right there in front of the church. So we had some kibbeling and some.
Those are the videos I made on YouTube of dropping of us dropping the herring. Maybe I can drop them into the video. I don't know. But it's important to remember that this was set up the day we did the Delta Works. The first place we went that morning was Horkham.
Yeah.
And we didn't mention that when we talked about that.
No. We already had a lovely breakfast with.
We'd had a breakfast
Arnout.
with Arnout there at Horkham.
And that's when that whole topic of his book came out.
That's right.
And we knew that we knew that we would do him a favor. That's how it went. We knew that we would do him a favor by giving him more subject matter for his book. So that's basically what we said. Arnout, drive us to Eindhoven and write about it later, and that's exactly what happened.
And that little town is one of the towns that still sort of has its wall around it, and that's part of the reason we went there. And
the market was really cool.
yeah, it was a cool little town. So we got to be in that town twice, which was lovely.
Yeah.
And the second time, Arnout is a member of that church, and so he basically got us a tour, and we went up behind the organ, and it was a lovely thing.
Yeah.
So
Very good.
So he got us to Eindhoven, and at Eindhoven we flew into this airport north of London. There seem to be 3 major airports that feed London, and we actually, by the time we fly out of this, we will have seen all of them.
Yeah. Well, actually, there's more than 4, but anyway, that's. Yeah.
Okay. So we flew in, and John, being the extrovert that he is, on the flight from Eindhoven to this other airport, I basically wanted to sleep because I hadn't slept the night before, and John chatted with the woman that was sitting next to him most of the time, which was a good thing because on the plane we start hearing not only did we have rail trouble getting from the Netherlands to the British Isles, but they were having railway strikes, and it was a major holiday this day we were coming in. And basically, we had no idea how we were going to get from the airport to a place where John could find us.
Yeah. That was the goal at that particular moment, for us to meet up with John Lumgar, who was the organizer of the first part of our time in the UK. And so this couple, they graciously pointed us in the right direction, and we ended up on the right bus, and we chatted some more, and then we had our introduction into the tube, and then we slept that one night in this hotel that John had arranged for us. It's all a bit of a blur to me right now.
You were pretty. We all had moments in this trip where it was like you sort of hit a wall.
That was my wall,
and that was John's wall that day. We had that walk. We had no sleep. We had that long walk through the tube, uphill to this little hotel, and John got there, and John was like, "We have to do any more walking." But he woke up the next morning, and he was fine. So it was all good. It was all good.
And then the next morning was when things started to happen, because that's when we went on our way to the north.
That's right.
And the way to the north was in 3 stages, 2 stages for, well, 3 stages for both of us.
Yeah.
So first stop was in Birmingham for me, and John had organized an estuary group there. We met in a really cool bar, and that went very, very well. And basically he just got a bunch of people together, and they got a taste of the estuary protocol, and they loved it. So, and Paul, meanwhile, went from that hotel all the way up to your friend's house.
Yes, I have some friends that are in Bradford, and they're friends from the Dominican Republic from my time there, and I haven't seen them in 18 years, and so I went up to Saltaire, which is a World Heritage Site. It's a really cool town near Bradford in northern England, near Leeds, and had a wonderful time with my friends, and really had a lovely time seeing this town that some industrial magnate built because he wanted better working conditions for his workers. And actually a lot of Hollywood companies filmed there, and there were like film vans from Hollywood productions there while we were there, so it was very interesting. But he did the Birmingham,
Yep.
the beginning of the Birmingham estuary with Tayo. We talked about some of this. We did our little video with Tayo after the Manchester event.
Right. And so you joined us for the Manchester event. So then we had another estuary there. So that's 2. And it was kind of cool because, we can really say that the one in Birmingham was the first ever. And the one in Manchester was the second ever estuary meeting in the UK, and organized by 2 members of ELSNet, and just wonderfully attended, and we loved all the people we met, and there were quite a few people there that actually had very little prior exposure to you and
Yeah.
experience. So
Yeah.
this was an interesting way to introduce you to them, and they appreciated the format. So, and then from Manchester, there was, oh yeah, so this was a little bit disappointing because I was still hoping to get at least on one ferry to get to Northern Ireland. But Paul, having had the experience of making it from Germany to London, was not about to relinquish control.
Having
of
had the experience of almost not making it from Germany to London, I was not looking for another harebrained ferry scheme to cross over to Northern Ireland.
Even though, in the end, somebody stepped up and said, I would have loved to have driven you from Manchester to Cairnryan, where the ferry to Belfast would have gone. And so then we would have seen a little bit of Scotland. As it was, we didn't see anything of Scotland. We might have stopped by at what's his name? Anselman. Yeah, we were thinking of stopping by at his place.
I mean, we got all the way over here, Anselman, and Anselman couldn't make it down from Scotland. So some future trip we will have to get to Scotland because I really want to meet Anselman face to face.
So do I. Yeah, he goes through the trouble of speaking Dutch to us, even to me, online in the comment section.
Wow.
Yeah, no, he does that. Yeah.
Wow.
Excellent. Thank you, Anselman. But anyway, we missed your place, and instead, Paul made arrangements for us to fly from Manchester to Belfast, at which point Mark Connolly, also prearranged by Paul, came to pick us up, and that turned into another one of these wonderful experiences.
Oh, we had so much fun in Ireland.
Yep.
Things went really well. So Mark picked us up at the airport, and we got a chance to see this Bemberb Priory. Got a chance to walk down by the river, and I'm really hoping that Mark, he's doing more and more events. This was the second Paul Kingsnorth event there, and there's a third Paul Kingsnorth event that will happen in November.
Already sold out.
Already
so
sold
you're
out.
Out of luck. If you were hoping to see that, it's not going to happen.
So we really saw that Bemberb Priory has a real potential for being, one of these estuary hubs, one of these nodes in this circuit of having great events. And I told him, I said, if I can get Peugeot and Vervaeke over across the Atlantic, they have just a terrific space there. And some of the aspects that I saw at the German festival, I mean, there's plenty of grounds there to camp. There are also accommodations for people to stay. We stayed in this old manor house.
It was lovely.
I had this 2-room suite. It's owned by a Roman Catholic,
Servites.
the Servites in order, and just a wonderful facility, wonderful people. We had a wonderful event. Now, I've got the recordings of that event that I haven't looked at yet. I didn't have time that night to give them all to Mark, so I will send them to him when I get back to a really good fiber connection. But the Calvin Robinson and the other woman that were going to appear at this event both canceled semi-last minute. And so it was just Paul Kingsnorth and I and Mark. And so part of what we talked about was, why don't we take some of the stuff that Paul Kingsnorth and I had talked about. This was actually Paul Kingsnorth's idea. And why don't we split the whole group up? We had, about 50 to 60 people or so, into all kinds of groups. And when we have the breakout groups, have them use the estuary protocol to facilitate their breakout conversations. Now, this was completely new. John's priority on this trip has been estuary. And so John kind of wondered, how is estuary going to fit into that Northern Ireland event? But it just
smooth
gelled.
as glass. Smooth as glass. It was amazing. And everybody had a good time, and we were able to actually spend quite a bit of time sharing. And these are all people that didn't actually come with a any prior experience of Paul Van de Clay. They might have come primarily for either Paul Kingsnorth or for the event, because there was quite a large group of people that come regularly to whatever it is that Mark puts on, and it is just a way for them to get together as a group, and it's a kind of a cultural pilgrimage for them to show up there every once in a while with friends, and they knew nothing about what the actual content was going to be, and here they're being shuffled in little groups and asked to have a conversation about what they just heard, and from all reports that went very well.
Yeah. Well, there were a number of people who did come because they watched my videos, and there's some real potential for some estuary groups there in Northern Ireland. I was quite struck by there were some Presbyterian churches around. There was Church of Ireland around, which is basically Anglican. And there was a clergyman from the Church of Ireland that I met just as greeting people as they were leaving. He was the guest of some other people who had come to the priory for some other things. And he said to me, he said, at the beginning of this event today, if you had told anyone that they would be having a conversation together, he said, I don't think people would have believed you or people would have stayed for it. But he was very impressed by how everybody, and there were people, Roman Catholics, Church of Ireland, so atheists, there were people sort of across the spectrum, some of the people who are obviously following this channel getting interested in Orthodoxy. So it just gelled beautifully that evening. And so really excited, really fun to meet Paul Kingsnorth. Awesome to get to know him a little bit better, and we talked about getting Peugeot out there at some point, and of course Jonathan and Paul haven't met each other yet either face to face. So again, a lot of potential for ongoing meetings, and I think a lot of interest in Estuary. We'll see if some gel from that group. Did you get any commitments, or at least? Oh yeah, there was a Roman Catholic deacon who also had the last name of Kingsnorth, who went to that event and was very excited about Estuary and is going to talk to John about getting into ElseNet because he wants to use that in his work in the Roman Catholic Church. So, another things that sort of came out of this was just how broadly ecumenical this thing is getting.
Yep.
So we have obviously
the first church where you preached on Sunday. We haven't even talked about that yet.
We haven't gotten there yet.
Oh, that's right.
We're still in Ireland. I preached at the German festival, and that will be available on Cassidy's channel and eventually on my channel when it's prepared.
But now we're still in Ireland.
We're still in Ireland.
Okay.
But that event went very, very well, and I will post the videos from it soon. But again, the takeaway from that event for me was just how practicable this estuary method really is in a lot of different settings to get people in a short amount of time to have a really productive conversation. I sort of visited all of the groups as they were having their breakout session, heard a lot of stories about the decline of the church in Ireland, the questions about where the society is going in Ireland, a lot of really, I was very impressed at the kinds of things that people were sharing. I really got the sense that Ireland has been changing rapidly, and there's a degree of uncertainty among people in terms of where is this all going, especially with respect to culture and religion, because the Roman Catholic Church and the Irish have been so deeply bonded. Another surprise to me was just how I would always imagine that there would be a pretty fixed border between Northern Ireland and the rest of Ireland, but there's no passport controls. Again, it's just sort of like driving between states in the U.S. or from the Netherlands to Germany. So there's actually a lot of people and a lot of movement in Ireland between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, which are, of course, under two different sovereignties, let's say. So, yeah. So the Irish event, again, left there hugely encouraged, really excited about the potential that Mark has there. His channel is More Christ. The potential that Mark has there to not just host conversations like he does online, but also facilitate events there that are, very much in keeping with what we're doing in this little corner of the internet.
Very much so. Very much so. And then we flew on an airline that I had arranged, and you trusted me with that. Thank you for that.
Different airport, which was a good thing because Mark asked us. So 2 airports in Belfast, visited both of those.
Yeah, I know. We almost drove to the wrong airport. So, but anyway, then we flew from the downtown airport in Belfast to
To Gatwick.
Gatwick.
Our second London airport.
Yeah. And there, John was there to wait to pick us up.
Yep.
And we navigated the tube again and above ground no, just a tube. What did we do? Or did we take a taxi?
Boy, this is why I wanted to do this, because things get foggy fast. Because I'm trying to. So we met John at the bus station at that Starbucks when we got into that first airport. Now, when we got into that, no, John didn't pick us up. Glenn Scrivener picked us up.
Oh, that's right. Yep.
Glenn Scrivener picked us up at Gatwick. He lives in southern England, and he drives in because. So we had the events at Bemberg Priory
on Friday
and Friday night, and then Saturday morning we get to the airport and we fly to London because we had the events at Oak Hill.
That's right.
With Christy Mayer, who teaches philosophy at Oak Hill College, or Oak Hill School, I don't know what they call it, and then Tom Holland that evening.
Yes.
So we had that event.
And that was a large event with hundreds of people, all sold out. So that was definitely something that got people's interest for some reason. And yeah, so then...
And that's all recorded too, and that will be put out on Speak Life on Glenn's channel, and probably eventually on my channel too.
Yep.
And those events went very, very well. Big thanks to Oak Hill. They had... I was busy talking to people, but boy, did those hors d'oeuvres and things they have there look good. They really had a nice reception all along the way.
Yeah, beautiful.
So had a wonderful conversation with Christy Mayer, and then had a wonderful conversation with Tom Holland.
Over dinner?
And then, before dinner, had a dinner with Tom Holland and a bunch of the people from the college, and John, and Louise Perry, who's written the book about the sexual revolution. So that all went very well. And Justin Brierley was there too. So then Justin Brierley, who has 4 children and so has a minivan, drove us from the restaurant all across London to a house that John and I knew nothing about. The crazy thing about this trip is that we basically had a couple of fixed dates and threw out our itinerary kind of to the viewers of this channel and to the people in Estuary. And
we placed ourselves at their mercy.
Yes. And so then we hear, we're staying in the guest room of
41 Community.
And we had no idea what that was. Now, if you watch my channel faithfully, the last video I posted, I'll put the link below again, here in this video, that's the community. But we knew nothing about it, and it was, but we should also say that a bunch of people from the Bridges of Meaning Discord server had gotten together to do dinner before the event as well.
They didn't tell us about it.
No, so Phil was there, and Andrew was there, and Ginger Bill was there, and a bunch of people from the Discord community were there at that dinner before the Tom Holland event.
Which actually goes to show that this whole experience is a kind of a merging of all different aspects of this little corner of the internet, because this is the specific thing where the Discord server really came through to organize something on their own, even without us.
Yeah.
Paul wasn't even there, so.
No. So
that was cool.
So then we got to that house in the evening, and big thanks to Justin Brierley who drove us all the way there through the city streets. These London drivers, I'm tremendously impressed. This is not an easy city to get around, and narrow streets, and these guys just zip, 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 zip.
And I have spent most of my life, most of my more than 70 years, declaring to the world that if I ever have to go to London, I would just rent a car and drive the way the English do. I would just switch over to the left. I'm here to say that will never happen. Never. I am deathly afraid of even trying to shift with my left hand. I don't think I have any muscle memory to shift with my left hand. So anyway,
so we had a wonderful talk with Justin Brierley in the van, and again, the dude's just zipping through London traffic, shifting with his left hand, talking to us like nothing. And to have a conversation with Justin Brierley is just like being unbelievable. He's his happy, cheery,
very
knowledgeable, affable self, and just zipping through, driving. And so then we got to that house and hit the hay, had a good night's sleep that night.
Yep.
And let's see, so then it was
Sunday.
So
what do people do on Sunday in London?
Again, this was John Lumgar had basically, his pastor had been on sabbatical until this Sunday, and he'd asked me if I would be willing to preach. And I was in fact very excited about this. Visiting the church was a high point of this trip because I love churches, and a big part of this trip for me was I wanted to get a sense of what's going on in church life here in the countries that we visited. And I feel like I got a good introduction to many different levels and layers of church. In Ireland, got a real sense of what's going on in the Roman Catholic Church. Talked to Paul Kingsnorth, a sense of what's going on in the Orthodox Church, at least in Northern Ireland.
A little bit in Holland.
And then I got a chance to preach in this church, which was in some ways similar to a church plant that I've helped set up in the United States. They meet in a school, they set up the chairs. It was sort of a non-denominational music style, was praise and worship. Lots of little kids. A bunch of people came from that were at Estuary Interest. Some of them had been to the Tom Holland event, which is really nice because I didn't have a lot of time at that event to really get to know people, just in the times between the talks. So had a lovely Sunday morning service, and we should probably. So I got to preach, and that was really lovely. I really enjoyed that. And then after the service, John stands up and says something quite spontaneously to the people, and you should tell them what you said.
Could be awkward.
I know.
So, some years ago, I took my daughter to enter college at Point Loma in California, and the college split the audience into the parents and the students. And they talked to us a little bit about, this is a time of transition. Your child is going to be more like an adult and leave the home, and you're gonna you drove here with her in the car, and you're gonna drive home without her. You're gonna leave her behind. And then they sang that song. Blessed be the name of the Lord. The Lord gives and takes away, gives and takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. All from Job, of course. Any of you who are members of evangelical churches will have sang that song many times.
We sing it a lot at Living Stones. It's
a
favorite song of
Living
mine.
Stones, yep. And wouldn't you know, first song in the service, even before Paul preached, blessed be the name of the Lord. And somehow, the lady next to me has a beautiful voice, and she sounded like my daughter, who also has a beautiful voice. It kind of made the connection in my mind, and the memory of that event many years ago. I mean, she's been out of college for 15 years already. And I started crying. And it was a weird cathartic experience, because I see all these young people with their young children, and I say, they have no idea what's hanging over their head. They have all these little kids running around, and they're all busy with their kids, all young families, young parents. And I says, I wonder if I should just share that with them. And so I decided at the end of the service to do that. I says, these kids are with you for a good chunk of time, and you'll have a lot of opportunity to interact with them. But there will come a time when they're going to leave, and they're going to fly the coop, and they're going to spread their wings, and they're going to take off, and so then it will feel as though you're abandoned, and it'll feel like God takes something away from you. But this is the way it's supposed to be. And the Lord gives and takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And so I was able to share that with him, and apparently that fell in.
Yeah, that was lovely. Should I talk about the dream?
Yeah. Your dream.
Not my dream, someone else's dream. So this is a lovely little church, and very diverse. You've got people with dark skin, people with light skin, and John Lumgar does a lot of work with immigrants, helping. I had a lovely conversation with one woman she was from Bulgaria, and she told me the story of how she came to that church where there was like an immigrant cafe, something like that they had run, and that was basically a program helping connect immigrants with English language training, helping them find an apartment. And I guess John Lumgar has really been doing that, and so that had brought her in. And so she told me all of her story about how she got there. So there's some people in the church, and there are two couples from Latin America, and one spoke a little bit more English than the other. And so then after the service, after I talked to a lot of people, someone called me over. Can you speak with these people? And they, how's your Spanish? And it's a little rusty, but I can understand quite well. And the woman telling me the story didn't speak much English, so she told me the whole story in Spanish. And she told me that last April she had a dream, and this dream was very impactful. She woke up after it. She had called her mother. I don't know if her mother is back in, I don't remember which country she came from in Central America, but she called her mother to tell her mother the dream. This dream really impacted her. It made a big impression on her. And so then she's telling me about this, it was like April 15, and she woke up and she was very impacted, so she had to tell her mother, and she told her husband, and she told people about this dream. And in this dream, there was a very tall man who looked very white and had a big white beard and just was very big and very loud and very white. And when she came into church and when I stood up to preach, she said, "There's the guy from my dream. I dreamed about this man." Now, so you want to know what the dream was. It's a very interesting dream. So one of the conversations that we've been having with people in Europe has been sort of the impending anxiety about winter coming. And Tom Holland, in the Tom Holland event, actually spoke about this quite a bit. And so when those videos are released, you'll want to see that part that Tom Holland talked about. Because, of course, with the Ukrainian war, Russia shutting off the gas and oil, Germany, the Netherlands, and the UK, people here are very anxious because they're looking at very... Yeah.
Today we heard tenfold.
Today we heard tenfold, at least for small businesses. The government's going to try to buffer some of the residential housing spikes, or not housing spikes, but energy cost spikes. But they're looking at really insane energy price hikes that are coming down, and potentially looking at roving blackouts, although I hear that's what we have in California with the heat wave that they're under, rolling blackouts. So her dream was this, that this big white man with the big white beard came to their church, and I hope I remember the dream correctly, and had something like an electrical saw, which was plugged in, and it was electrical saw, and then all of this wood. And what he was doing was using this electrical saw. You know how dreams are, they don't really make a lot of sense. they had this electrical saw and the wood, and this big white man was taking the wood with the electrical saw and making these little molds, these little wooden molds. And I was just using this electrical saw to make these little wooden molds. And then the power went out and everything was dark. And I told the people, don't worry, the saw will keep working. And the saw did keep working, even though the power was out and it was an electrical saw. And I kept making these little wooden molds. And, well, what were these little wooden molds? Well, in these little wooden molds, we would basically put light. And so I was giving these little wooden molds to the people of the church and sending them out as light in the darkness. That was the dream. So make of it what you will. I do not make this up. This woman didn't know me at all or anything that we were doing. I mean, I don't know the level of her English skills, but she just basically showed up in church that Sunday, and she had this dream in April, and she had told her mother about this dream. This dream just really impressed her, and then when she saw me in church, you're the guy in my dream. And so, pretty crazy. So that was quite moving too.
Do you have an electric saw?
I have an electric saw at home, but I don't make little wooden molds out of it for basically little lights in the darkness. But so we'll see. Yeah. Wow. So yeah, that was quite something. So then after church, we went to dinner. No, we went to lunch. Right. We went to lunch.
And this was a group
at
of
Slurp.
people.
Restaurant's name is Slurp, and I thought, must be a soup restaurant.
Thai. I ate Thai. No.
Thai, Chinese.
No, I ate nasi goreng, which is Dutch.
You ate nasi goreng?
Yeah.
That's basically Indonesian Dutch food.
Yeah, that's what I had, a whole plate full. Nasi goreng. Oh. Loved it.
I had cashew chicken. I wanted to get the red curry, but they had a lot of those little peppers on the menu, and I knew I had more talking to do. And so I said, "Can you modulate the heat?" And the guy says, "No." So it's like, okay, we'll just get cashew chicken. But it was delicious, and so with a big event like the Tom Holland event, that was just really fun. Getting to meet Tom Holland and shake his hand and meet more of you, that was all good. But the frustrating thing about those big events are I can't really get to know people.
We had minimal contact with the people at the Oak Hill event.
Yeah. And that was too bad. But then some people stayed after the Oak Hill event, went to church that morning, and then went out to lunch. And so there were a couple guys from Bristol and who came for the Estuary meeting and just, and you know who you are, just really had a lovely time getting to know them and hearing their stories and talking to them. And that to me is, that's the real fun of a trip like this, is getting a chance to get into smaller groups and hear your stories. I love your stories. So, and so the lunch was really fantastic.
But they also were very kind to us.
Yes, they were.
Now here is a pastoral couple, the pastor who just came back from his sabbatical and his wife, and they have several children.
4 children, yeah.
4 children. And their idea was that we should take a nap.
Which was, for me, very much needed after, so Friday we had the Priory events, Saturday we had the Oak Hill events with flying from Belfast to London. That went late into the night. Sunday was preaching and church and reading and lunch, and so I got to lay down and take that, that little Sunday afternoon half-hour nap, and it just kind of,
it was lovely,
snaps you back into shape.
Yes.
And
it made us wonder, though. Remember, we talked about that. How did Jordan Peterson do it?
Oh, I don't know how.
And if we were on the road, as long as he was on the road, maybe we would have a breakdown also.
That's true. That's true.
So
then after the naps, they have the pastor's house, and then they sort of have, because it's a church plant and they rent the school, they sort of have a churchy building, an office that's sort of in his backyard, and so then we had a group from the church, and we had a question and answer session, which was also recorded. and I should be able to get that recording. And John Lumgar's going to have to, figure out a way to get that recording to me. And it was only done on a cell phone, so I don't know the quality of that recording. But I thought that was a really good question and answer session.
Yep.
Quite a diversity of questions from some of the people of the church, and went very well. So
and then we pivoted somehow to
Yep.
Estuary.
Yep.
And I just said a couple of things about how we normally do it, and then said, do you want to try it? And everybody said yes. So we split into two groups and had two separate estuary meetings, one led by you and one led by me, and it was perfect.
Yeah, and he got most of the women because we were inside and they're like, it's cold outside. Many of the men inside were like, it's warm in here. So the men went out and the women stayed inside. And it was one of the real takeaways for me from this trip is just how practicable this estuary protocol is at taking people who have never done any of this and getting them talking in a very satisfying and productive way.
And this mostly female group reacted exactly the same way as all the other groups that I've done it with. In other words, the protocol does not seem to be dependent on gender at all.
No. So then we had the estuary meeting, and we had, I don't know if I don't like saying names of people who might not necessarily, but a lovely young woman who had picked us up that morning for church and then drove us back to Phil's 41 community. And then we got there, because one of the things that we were a little disappointed in, once we got a sense of the community that had the house that we were staying in, they have a couple times a week, they have a communal meal, but we got back on time on Sunday night to sit down with them. So you can get a sense of just how long that day was. So we had a chance to sit down with them in their communal meal space, and got a chance to meet some of them, and just there was a former member of the house that was visiting that you had quite a long conversation with then, but got a chance to really get a sense of the community in that house.
Yeah, and it is intentional communal living, and if you don't know anything about it, there are actually more examples of that than I was aware of. There were several in London that we learned about, because on the next day we went to another example of intentional communal living, and then we learned from Andrew's wife that she also is doing different iterations thereof on a more short-term basis. But the idea, it's a weird comparison, but it's like Burning Man.
Yeah.
Burning Man is intentional communal living with some guidelines, and the original people that put Burning Man together had some very high aspirations to have a cashless society, a way in which you share with one another, you clean up after yourself, and you tolerate anything and everything.
This is a little window into just how open this man is. Okay, just how diverse and varied his story is, because he's speaking with intelligence about Burning Man. He's done the Camino. I mean, don't think that John Van Donk is some little sheltered wallflower who hasn't had any experience in life. But go on. Because a lot of people are going to hear this and say, well, isn't Burning Man the place where they run around naked in the desert?
Too.
Yeah, that too.
And not only that, Burning Man is no longer what it was. I mean, when I was at Burning Man, when we drove out of the place, and there's so much emphasis on cleaning the place out, and leaving no trace behind, and making sure that you pick up all your litter and everything, we were driving behind a car, and as we crossed the border from the playa back on the public road, they threw all their trash out of the window of their cars. Horrible. It's tragedy. Anyway, that's not what this is about at all. And Burning Man is no longer what it once was.
It's a rather, I'm just getting my water bottle. It's a rather funny example, John. And I don't know what Phil's going to think about you comparing his Christian communal living with Burning Man.
If he is wise, he will study the origins of Burning Man. I am not saying anything about what it is right now. I think it's horrible. I think it's totally commercialized. I will never set a foot in the place ever again.
What year did you go to Burning Man?
2007.
That's not that long ago.
No, and it was still normal then. And the price was still normal.
Oh.
Right now it's 5 times as much, and all the crazies show up. And it's very commercialized. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But no, what I'm talking about is
We did not do Burning Man Europe this trip. I just want to say that clearly here, just so there's no...
The only reason I brought it up is that intentional communal living comes in secular and Christian varieties and is a thing all by itself. It is something worth looking into. What do people talk about when they talk about intentional communal living? It requires a certain mindset, it requires some discipline, it requires some maturity. Not everybody can do it. And it can have a beautiful result in your life, but it also makes some demands on you. It's not, not everybody is capable of making those kind of sacrifices to be with another group of people.
Yeah.
So there's benefits and there's a cost associated with it. It requires a little bit of sacrifice, but the rewards are enormous. Yeah. And I think that, just judging from the way that people talked about it at 41, I mean, I talked to several people there and they were just delighted to be there.
Yeah, yeah.
So
then that night, I did that conversation with Phil that is on the channel, and that's
the link will be below.
The link will be below, and that's why I was so doggone tired, and I really didn't want to bail because the conversation was going well, and if I had had more energy, it would have been good to go another hour because Phil has a really cool vision. He would like to be able to have a hand in starting more houses like he's doing it. And there's a sort of a light touch. They have prayer at 7:30 in the morning in the greenhouse, and they have a couple of communal meals a week. But it's some intentional Christian communities are much more monastic. But it's nice to have different variations of that, different levels of that. And I think, so I want to have Phil on the channel again and do more with that, because I think when you're looking at addressing the meaning crisis, when you're looking at Christian formation and discipleship, I think there needs to be more models variety and models for communal living than what we have now.
But we were exposed to several because then the next day you wanted to get together with David? Was that day?
No, so
that was Justin.
So this was Sunday night. Sunday was a massive day. That whole weekend. Friday was Ireland. Saturday was Tom Holland. Sunday was the church. I mean, those 3 days were just packed. So then Monday was fairly easy. So
Monday you were going to get back together with your friend, because isn't that when I went on?
No, so Monday morning. I had lunch with Justin Brierley. We didn't record anything. But I really wanted to get a sense from Justin about, I figured if anybody knew anything about the state of the church in England, Justin would, and even in Europe, just because of all that Justin talks about. So I took a train out to the town where Justin lives, and he gave me a little tour of the church he goes to, and he showed me a church downtown, and we had a lovely lunch in the center of the town that he lives in, and just had a wonderful conversation with Justin. He's working on a new book that I'm very excited about, and he's going to give me a chance to read it and give some input before it all finally goes out. So had a terrific time with Justin that day.
While you were doing that, I slept in late and had a talk with some of the people in the home, in the community house at the 41 community, and then I decided to take a very gentle little stroll. My legs are kind of hurting me a little bit, so I decided to just take it real easy, and I decided to walk to the Riverwalk in Vauxhall. That's the name of the neighborhood we were at, Vauxhall. And I'm sitting down on a little bench there next to a guy, and I look down there and I see on the sign, Uber boat. Uber boat? So I said to the guy, I says, do you have any idea what that is?
You got to know something about John. John is like a 100% an extroversion. John will walk around and talk to people and ask them for things, and that's part of the reason John and I make a good team, because I'm a little more reticent and John will make the ask. And if you're at any of these events, he'll make the ask. So anyway, Uber boat.
So the guy says, yeah, the Uber boat, you can take that all the way to Greenwich Village. I don't even know where that is. So it takes you all the way through downtown London, past the Big Ben, and past the Parliament, and past the all the fancy bridges and buildings, and all the churches and what have you, and anything that's visible from the Thames, you can see from the Uber boat, and it's $20. 1 hour that way, and 1 hour that way. If you sit on the same side of the boat the whole time, you can see both sides. And so I did that, and I was on the water for 2 hours. Floated all the way down the Thames toward the ocean. It was super low tide. And it was an absolutely lovely experience. Took lots of pictures. So yeah, that was my touristy thing for the trip.
Yeah.
So thanks for leaving me behind.
Yeah. So then that evening, we had
another community.
Lee Abbey. Apparently there's a big one in another town here in the UK, but they sort of have a student housing center in London. And John Lumgar had arranged this. And so we went to Lee Abbey.
Met with Tim,
who
was very enthusiastic.
Runs a bunch of their things. And again, this was, part of another piece of this trip was many of the, especially in the UK, many of the people that we went to, the church, Lee Abbey, many of the people had either no knowledge of me and Estuary or very vague knowledge of what any of this was about. And so there were a number of people for whom this whole life, they'd never seen any of my videos. Estuary was a completely new idea. There was a lot of skepticism, but a little bit of interest, enough to interest to say, yeah, you can have a space and maybe I'll sit in on it. And
he did.
And he did. And we had a number of people who had done it on the church the night before. They liked it so much they came again the next night, which was really cool. And then we had other people who watched me on the channel. Some people that had gone to the Tom Holland event then came to the Lee Abbey event. And it's an amazing space that we had to work with. And again, we split up and we had one big circle where we all introduced each other. And then we split up and did Estuary again. And it went really, really well. Met some super interesting people who only made it to that event. And just really good. And again, you know who you are. I'm not going to out you, but wonderful.
Yeah, it was a lovely time. And then again, that same lady who drove us around in her Mini, she took us home again that night, because getting around in London is it's simultaneously easy if you know your way around, but for the uninitiated, it's a little bit intimidating. And she decided to go right smack downtown, past all kinds of really cool buildings, and the London nightlife and the lights that were all associated with it. It was really quite an interesting trip. And then she brought us back to the community house where we spent another night.
Yep. And the next morning, we were going to have to make our way to Salisbury, but I was going to do coffee with David Fuller. Again, we didn't record anything. We just had a lovely conversation about the kinds of things that the intersection between my channel and Rebel Wisdom, and so we had a lovely time. And for me, that was a chance to navigate the tube on my own, to find my way through. I had to learn to navigate the trains to get over to Justin Brierley outside of town, and navigated the tubes to get across town to David Fuller, to over where he lives, and had a lovely conversation with him. And then I had a little bit of time on the way back, so then I did a little bit of sightseeing, and I saw the Tower of London and London Bridge. I had seen a little bit of the Parliament building in Big Ben the day before when John was doing his thing. So, but I had that date with David Fuller, and so John didn't have anything. So John,
I left early to go to Salisbury, where I met up with Andrew, and he is a auxiliary priest, now retired, at the Salisbury Cathedral, and very proudly showed me all the various features. It's a very old building too, and told me all about the history. It was a lovely experience, and I'm very thankful for him. And then a little later, he went and picked up Paul from the train, and we all participated in Evensong Without Song.
yeah. But the Salisbury Cathedral, once I got there and saw it, I was a little torn because I could have caught an earlier train, and the cathedral is super interesting. The story behind it, the town, Salisbury, the town, it's all super interesting, and the cathedral is just magnificent. And it's very old, and so that's, when I come back here, I definitely want to get back down to Salisbury and spend more time looking at that cathedral, because it was just tremendously impressive.
Yeah.
And so then we had evensong at the cathedral, and a few people from the channel, Paul, who I had from Bristol on not too long ago, and some others came from the channel and had evensong with us. And then we went to the Pheasant Inn, which is, the Salisbury is an old town. It's part of what's interesting there is that they moved the cathedral and they rebuilt the town in like the 13th century. And so it's a very old place. And
it did not get bombed during the war.
It did not get bombed during the war. And the Pheasant Inn was about a 16th century building. Really cool, good food.
It was not made for the likes of you.
Short.
So Paul had to bend way over to make it in the door.
And so Andrew, you can find Andrew on Twitter. He's mostly into motorcycling on Twitter. That's what he uses Twitter for, because he's passionate about motorcycles, and he's got beautiful countryside to drive his motorcycles around on. And he, all along the way, that was a fairly late entry into the schedule. And he said, come down to Salisbury, and he said, I can show you the cathedral, we'll do evensong. Have a meal together.
And I'll take you back to the train.
I really don't know if anybody's going to show up. Now, earlier in the trip, this is just how fluid the schedule on the trip was. Jonathan Rowson had contacted David Fuller, and we were going to do an interview with Jonathan Rowson in a manor southwest of Salisbury. And David Fuller was going to drive us down there, and then something came up in Jonathan's schedule and he couldn't do it, which was a pretty big disappointment. We were really looking forward to that manor and lunch, and I've really appreciated Jonathan Rowson's interviews, both with Jordan Peterson and with John Vervaeke. His interview with John Vervaeke on the Rebel Wisdom channel, I think, is one of the best John Vervaeke interviews, and so I was really looking forward to a chance to talk to him. Didn't happen this trip, so I might have Jonathan on the channel at some point. But so then, but Andrew was always like, I don't know if anybody's going to show. It might just be a couple of us here. He had talked to some of his other clergy that were in the area and at the cathedral, and he just kept expectations super low.
And I don't think that he really knew what he invited them to. It turns out afterward.
So we get to the inn, and the inn is sort of semi-closed on Tuesday nights because they hardly have any customers, but the numbers just kept growing, and we wound up having a really wonderful group down there
who all bought dinner from the inn.
Yeah, and they were all from different places down in this area. This group had more clergy in it than any other group we've ever had.
Correct.
Which was very interesting. And there were clergy from across the spectrum.
Yeah.
One was from sort of a
charismatic church.
A charismatic church. One was from a Protestant sort of C of E church in a parish that sort of has the whole spectrum of people in it, from theological. Then we had,
there's only one Anglican church, so they were
right.
Yeah, one Anglican church, so the whole range of Anglicans all belong to that.
And we had a canon. It's so funny. The Anglicans have all these names, and the Christian Reformed Church, you're a minister of the word. That's what you are, even though you have. So anyway, so we had a number of C of E clergy, and yeah, it was. And again, first we had a meal together, which was lovely, and then
we couldn't really talk to each other very well around the table, and so then the proprietor of the place offered us the upper room.
Yes.
And that blew us away.
Such a cool space. I mean, this old building, and of course everything's all at weird angles, and you're looking over your windows onto all these old roofs in this very old town. It was super cool, and it was just a great space. So then we had one big circle for us, and we had talked. It gave basically introduction to Estuary. Had some Q&A, a lot of questions from clergy because especially before we had done it. What is this? How do you use it? How did it arrive? None of that is recorded, so you won't see it. But then we split up into two groups. One went downstairs around a table, and the other stayed upstairs. And again,
smooth as glass.
Really well. Went really well. And again, the big takeaway for me this trip is just how practicable this method is at creating really good conversation among people. There is a little bit of selection bias because people are watching the channel.
But not all of them.
No, not all of them. In almost every meeting, we've had 2 or 3 people who had no idea who I was, never heard of Estuary. Some friend invited them, and they were there.
Seamlessly moved in, yeah.
And one of the clergymen there is definitely going to use this in his church, and I think others will too. After it's one thing to hear about it, you really have to do it to get a sense of, oh, this can work.
Well, and that is also the point of ELSNet, the Estuary Leader Support Network. Basically, all I do is give people the opportunity to familiarize themselves with the protocol by actually doing it online. So we have upward of 60 people, signed up. Not all of them do that every month, but quite a few of them regularly. And basically, that's what we do. We practice the Estuary protocol, and we engage in conversation as a result of that, always keeping in the mind the possibility that at some time in the not too distant future, we may actually try to do something real on the ground in our own community.
Right. So this, all of these Estuary meetings were super encouraging. Now, I don't know what will happen, of course. You can have a presentation and have an experience and then go back to your place and just get busy with life and forget the whole thing. That could happen. But I think a number of people are pretty set to at least try ELSNet and give it a chance and maybe try to get something going. And I think also a fair number of the people that we met who actually have some small group things that they need to do, I think saw a vision for using this in their small group settings to get some other things going. So big success then at the Pheasant Inn in Salisbury. Wonderful meeting.
And followed by a lovely, good night's rest at the lovely home of Andrew and his wife. So they hosted us for the night. I slept really well.
Yeah, I slept well too. And then in the morning we got up and had a lovely breakfast, and then went to see Stonehenge, which was super fun. And then after Stonehenge, had a little bite to eat, and then saw another big stone circle. Very interesting part of the country. Really impressed upon me the inevitability of religion.
Yeah, there were processions of people walking around.
You have a sacred space in the middle, pilgrims. I mean, I'm going to have to continue to ruminate on this, and I'm sure some stuff will come out in videos as they come forward.
Maybe some people in our audience will have some idea about what Stonehenge might mean and want to make a comment about that in the comment section.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So then Andrew just drove us to this hotel. We're in a hotel near Heathrow.
No, that's not what happened. No skipping over this part. Because John, at the second circle, didn't want to walk anymore and took a nice nap and stayed completely dry.
Yeah. So
I guarded the umbrellas.
So John was gracious. We had some extra time before we could really check into the hotel, and Andrew had mentioned some other things, and I kind of wanted to go see them. And John didn't want to do any more walking, so John said, hey, look, go and see what you want. I'll stay in the car. You guys can get out and explore. Explored really cool old church and these stones. And while Andrew and I are out in the middle of a totally open field, just this downpour. And
buckets.
And Andrew and I just got soaked. And these are the pants that are they're getting a little dry. They're still a little.
Hey, can you attach that little video that I shot to this video?
Might be able to. We could give it a try.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. We'll insert the actual evidence of the downpour.
Yeah, if you can send me the video, we'll have to see what we can do. So
it'll be in the comment section below.
Yeah. So it poured hard. And then finally, John and I took refuge under a tree, and I was, really, Andrew, I'm sorry. Andrew and I took refuge under the tree, and I was really glad there was no thunder and lightning because we were on a tree on top of the hill. Really cool country around here, around Stonehenge. I mean, everybody's heard of Stonehenge, but Stonehenge is just one element of a much broader region of these barrows and the Woodhenge and this other circle that we had, and it's just fascinating. It's just fascinating. When I was in London the day after I had coffee with David Fuller, went to a really interesting church near London Tower where they had the crypt downstairs, and then this church that I saw with Andrew today too, very old church in a small town, just super, super cool stuff. So a lot of people asking questions about some of my thoughts on Europe. I'm sure those will come out as videos go. I won't talk about them right now. Again, see the New World podcast, that sort of started it. And as videos, I'll see if I can get the video from the church service, my sermon, because I'm sure some of you would want to see that. So we'll accumulate as much video as we can from this trip, and that'll be dribbling out over the next few weeks, I'm sure. Next week, I'm home again for a Sunday. I don't think there'll be a rough draft because sermon's going to be pretty rough drafty anyway. But then after that comes the Thunder Bay event. So those of you on the North American side, if you can get up to Thunder Bay, again, you can fly there from Toronto, or you can drive up from Minneapolis, St. Paul. And I know the Europeans say 6 hours. That's a crazy amount of driving, but not for us Westerners.
No. And tomorrow we have to get up at 3:30.
Yeah.
To be ready for the taxi to pick us up at 4 o'clock. It'll be a long day again tomorrow.
Yeah.
But this was fun. It was worth it. I hope you enjoyed our little report about this. And thanks to everyone who might watch this, who participated or contributed to this journey. There were so many of you who worked together to make this possible and contributed in various ways, even bought tickets to various events. And thank you all. And we hope that you'll be a little bit blessed by all our adventures.
Yeah. Super thanks to, Job, Matthias, Cassidy,
John
Lumgar,
Tayo,
Andrew, Glenn Scrivener,
Mark Connolly.
I mean, these people put this trip together, and never would have happened without them.
And we're not going to out her, but our taxi driver, our London driver with the Mini, was a sweetheart.
So sweet. We met so many wonderful people on this trip.
Our various hosts. We spent the night in many different places. It reminded me of when I was walking in the Camino and I slept in a different place every day. But
yeah. So it's been a big trip. So yeah, thank you, John. And
do it again sometime.
But John and I have had a great time together. We really have. And a lot of people are like, "Well, are you coming back next year?" And it's like, maybe, might happen.
I can think of several scenarios if this circuit thing comes about.
Yeah.
I can think of several scenarios by which we might be back.
Yeah. Now about John's cough. because he's coughed a number of times and he wouldn't want to talk about it. Right when we were driving from Livingstone's to the airport, John's wife said to me, "Now John has a cough." It's a really good thing she said this to me. "Now John has a cough. It's not COVID. He always coughs. Don't worry about it." So, and then halfway through this trip, I started coughing, and
Oh, that was so mean.
so
That was so mean.
I started, and I think a lot of it is just change in air. We've done a ton of talking this trip, so throats are a little stressed. Sometimes they get dry, etc., etc. I wasn't worried about COVID or anything like that. I haven't felt ill at all the whole trip. But I just mentioned that, I've kind of catched your cough, John. And John looks at me and I just said, "Tuberculosis is such an ugly word." John does not have TB.
But he had to check it.
He wasn't too happy with me that night after he had to look up the symptoms of tuberculosis. If you had tuberculosis, you would have known it long ago. Especially since your wife just says, "John coughs. He's okay." Okay. Good enough for me. So, all right. Shall we land the plane?
I think we should land the plane.
All right.
In honor of Freddie.
In honor of Freddie. One love.
One love.